in this market guide, Gartner made a stance to really define the different types of DaaS because there's so many terms that are thrown around. DaaS, VDI, you've got VMware, Citrix, Cloud PC. And I think Gartner really wanted to, in this market guide, help people better understand when they say DaaS, what are those options, right? And so they talk, there's self-assembled, there's vendor assembled, and then they talked about vendor managed. And so you were touching on that a little bit. What's you guys' take on defining that and what some of those key differences are? Do you guys think Gartner did a good job clearly delineating that?
The line to me isn't necessarily blurred between self-assembled and vendor assembled. The line to me is much more blurred between vendor assembled and vendor managed, right? Because then it just becomes one of the biggest disservices that I feel like we do to ourselves. I'm curious what the three of your take is on this too, but the word management in the IT industry just sends a shiver down my spine, right? Because it can mean so many different potential things depending on who the audience is. Like, as an infrastructure, as a service provider and disaster recovery business continuity provider, primarily through the course of my career, I hear managed and I immediately think about platform management. I don't necessarily think about like OS level management. I don't necessarily think about supporting things down at that level once we get past the hypervisor. So when we talk about vendor managed, it's great conceptually, but what is the vendor managing? Because if it's vendor assembled, the vendor by default is managing the platform, right? Or are we talking about a consultant who comes in and, hey, I'm going to build you your own VDI solution and then I walk away? I don't think that really ever happens, does it?
I mean, I think it's all shades of gray. And we saw this, when you think about public cloud versus private cloud, and then there was virtual private cloud. And, I don't think that Gartner is trying to use the technology to decide, Scott, which bucket it lands in. There's lots of different technologies. I think they're really clearly, at least when I look at the table they have in there, they're trying to distinguish who owns what. But you'll notice that there's like overlap between it, and they have an area that says vendor, vendor responsible, customer responsible, and then they have an area that says could be vendor or customer. And that's those shades of gray that I think you're talking about, right, Kevin? And I think we see this all the time. Customers come to us, yeah, we want you to manage the infrastructure, but we still want to have the monitoring alerts. Or maybe they want us to monitor it because we're 24/7, but there's some security things that are really unique to their organization that they need to manage. And then you see people who are like, well, I want you to be my help desk. And you're like, wow. So it's shades of gray, I think, specifically when it comes to management. But at least in the table that Gartner had in there, they tried to show that in certain areas, there's going to be overlap, either where it's a partnership between the two. And I think that that's our take on it, right? As being an extension of someone's team, is we also want to give them the visibility that they need, right? At the end of the day, if they're the ones who are picking up the phone when their end users like, hey, it's not working, they're going to want some level of visibility and control. But I think they're really trying to put it in the box as far as, when it's assembled, it's who's buying the stuff, really the actual infrastructure that it resides on. And then I think the second piece is who's then managing it, right? So the assembly is based on who's buying the actual equipment and putting the equipment together. And then the management is who's running it day to day post assembly. I think that's what they're trying to accomplish.